And it's time for today's pre-show of our 220-1102 Core 2 A Plus study group. We're just getting things started. You can see we're 10 minutes away from getting started. The chat room is here. Hello, chat room. I need to pop out the chat so I can see things a little better on my screen. So let's do a pop-out chat. There we go. And then we'll move this over here. This is perfect. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Settle in about less than 10 minutes. We will be getting started with today's live stream and our 220-1102 study group. I've got all new questions for you from the exam objectives, so it should be fun. See how well you do on these. Everybody did so well yesterday. We're doing back-to-back because we did a study group yesterday. Now we're going to do one today. We don't often do them back-to-back, so this is, I say we don't usually, although last month we did 4 of them effectively back-to-back. We did 2 back-to-back and another 2 with a day in between. And we just don't normally do that. We normally are doing live streams, maybe 1 or 2 in a week, and we separate them so that my voice doesn't turn into this. But so far, so good. We're doing all right. We're doing okay. We're getting there. And given my schedule this week and next week, I'm very glad that we're getting this done. That way I know that we're able to make this happen for everyone who would like to tune in, and we're able to get some good content created for the website so that people can study and continue their efforts and all new things to try and different questions. And it's always a good idea. So this one nice thing about the live streams is it's always new content. It's always something different. We always write new questions for these. So, or we try to. So that's sort of the way it goes sometimes. Well, we are setting up here. Our recordings are going here. As you can tell, I did not move my camera down, which I really wanted to. I feel like I've got a lot of wasted space right here in that upper part of the picture. And I need to bring it down just a little bit, just a tad, just a smidge, just a little thing there. And we'll make it happen. If you have questions, as you can see on the screen, we will be taking questions in the professormesser.com/QA. There's your link. So that's where you can answer questions. It's where you can ask questions. It's where everything happens on that link. So pop open a new browser window. Everything except the live video is at that link. And hopefully, maybe we can get that integrated shortly. In the meantime, you can tell me where you are connecting from. So you can bring up the map and stick your virtual pin into our map to say where you are joining us from. So we've got a lot to go through today. This is going to be in our first hour where I ask you questions. So the second hour, I'm taking your questions. So I'll answer questions in the second hour. So it gives us a little something to do. It's a little bit different in that second hour. So you can always submit your questions now, and then I will sort through them. I get to see them on my side. I go to my Q&A, and if there are questions, they'll show up on my screen, and then I can just throw them over onto the view that you would work with. Here's some folks in the U.S. are checking in. We see some folks that are over in the EU. What other connections do we have? Some folks coming to us from Saudi Arabia. It's like a connection in from France. Maybe it's kind of hard to tell in this diagram exactly where that might be. Are they in Germany? Are they in France? Are they in, no, they're not in the UK, but I'm sure there are folks joining us from there. Hello, chat room. Hope everybody's doing well. Folks joining us there from San Antonio, Texas, and Tampa, Florida, just down the street from me. We have folks in Bangladesh and Michigan and Raleigh, North Carolina in the triangle. We've got New York City is here. I didn't even know we had a Statue of Liberty emoji, which is kind of cool. There's Nashville, Memphis, a lot of Tennessee checking in all of a sudden. Washington is here. Not sure which one. Nigeria, Euless, Texas, Jacksonville, Florida. A lot of Floridians checking in. Thanks for being here. Dallas is here. Berlin, Germany. Not the other Berlin, the one in Germany. Dallas, Texas, the one in Texas, not the other one. I don't know. We're just now, there's got to be another one somewhere, right? That's kind of how it works. We have all new Q&A for you. I've just been trying to get things going. There's some things I want to change in the studio with audio. The videos worked out okay. I mentioned this on the last live stream, is that I had been working on changing some of the audio chain and some of the video chain that I use to make it just slightly more efficient, just slightly easier to manage on the side. And I've been moving over the last number of years from having a lot of equipment in different places in the studio, because I would have a wiring closet or a wiring area that had a 19-inch rack and a bunch of equipment was in there. I would have equipment in the studio. You can't really see it in this view, but the desk that I'm at has 19-inch racks that are on the left and right side, and they are soundproofed. So I can keep relatively loud equipment. If I open this up, I don't think you can hear it. Yeah, you really can't on this mic, but I can hear it. And it is making noise in there, lots of fans and other things going on. So now I've been able to get everything into this desk. This desk runs everything now. And all of the lighting, all of the audio, all of the video, everything except for the camera back here. Hey, camera. That's my bird cam. The bird cam is obviously not connected to the desk, but everything else is, which is exactly what I wanted. So everything is really working out nicely in here. Our internet connection was new and upgraded last time we did this, yesterday, when we did this, and it really worked nice. So we're pretty happy how this is going. Nothing is foolproof, of course. Nothing is bulletproof. We know that there are cases where we might lose a little bit of audio or video or internet or that type of thing, but generally speaking, I'm really, really happy with how this is turning out. I'm also thinking kind of forward a little bit, because I know that there are other courses that we are about to start shooting. And when we get to that point, this turns into effectively the same thing you see here, except it's just me and the camera. And I'm looking to upgrade that as well and add some additional things to the camera. Well, we're working on that. We're getting there. It's always exciting when you know you can add a few things, make it a little bit better, optimize it a little bit. It's also nice when you do that and it actually works, which is not always what happens. Sometimes we do this and it does not work well, and we end up having to change things around. So thankfully this time we're all right. We're okay. Okay, well, we've got a couple of minutes left, 2.5 minutes. According to the clock, top of the hour, we get started. This is not the live stream. Well, it is the live stream, but it's not the study group. The study group starts at the top of the hour. This is just the time where I can sit down and make sure audio looks good. I can look at my stats for streaming. As you can see, we're putting out about 6 megabits per second of our 1080p stream. We've got 3% on our cache, which is a number that tells us how much information is staying local and how much information is being sent. So there's only 3% of our buffer that we are caching here. We're sending everything to YouTube. YouTube is crunching it up on their side and sending you a copy. So I only have to send one stream out, and then YouTube handles sending all the individual streams down to you. So that's where it works out. Where did I get my watch from? This watch. Is that the one you're referring to? The 11:58 a.m. watch. This is called Clock Phone. They got in a meeting. All the marketing people got together and said, "We've got this clock and it works on the phone, but we don't know what to call it. What are we going to call it? Let's call it Clock Phone." That's perfect, and that's what they did. That's what that is. That's how that works. Hey, Malk, good to see you. Thanks for coming back. Malk has not gotten tired of me yet. Eventually, Malk will decide. Maybe we could do something else with our time. Oh, you're working on getting over here. Never, huh? Well, that's very nice of you to say. But this is one of these things where I'm wondering what our next thing is going to be. We do these live streams occasionally. I would like to do a live stream that was a little different. But you know, that's one of those things where I don't want to take time away from the other things that we're doing, though. It's always a balancing act, of course. There's always the push and pull, the give and take, the up one wave and down the other kind of thing. About 30 seconds left. We'll get things started here. I guess I should get my act together on this side, make sure that I've got all of my things ready to go. I think we are in pretty good shape. Okay. Now we'll just do and get this live stream going. Before I'm going to bring up my keynote so that we get a green light. Yes, we got the green light, which means if we push the green light, we got slides. Everything looks super good. It is now time to get this thing going. So let's get the live stream underway, shall we? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2024 220-1102 Professor Messer Core 2 A+ Study Group. It is our study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you get to follow along and see how much you might know about these topics. We have a lot to go through today. We were already talking with the chat room in the pre-show about all of the different things going on around here, the changes that we're making in the studio, which is really just me talking about me moving wires around and pushing buttons. But today we're going to focus on A+. And if you are here live and you would like to follow along with us, we would love it if you could join by popping open a new browser window and heading over to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. This will take you to a service called Vevox. It's an odd name, but it works amazingly well to be able to vote and find out what things you can vote on. You'll be able to see the questions as they come up in the Vevox app, which is kind of nice. So I would highly recommend you have a look at the Vevox app and see what options are there. Just simply go to professormesser.com/QA. If you do that and you're able to see that there is at least something there to view, you'll see a question waiting for you. We refer to these questions as rewind questions because they are questions that I set aside from last month so that we can get in, try out Vevox, make sure we're able to answer questions. The question that you'll find waiting for you is here, and it asks, an administrator has verified malware symptoms on a device and removed the computer from the network. Which of the following would be the next step in the malware removal process? Would it be schedule a scan, educate the end user, disable system restore, boot into safe mode, or update anti-malware signatures? Now, the standing rule that we have in the study group is we do not answer these questions in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. We are instead going to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in this particular answer. So make sure you use that link to be able to submit any of your answers. We're going to come back to this question in just a bit, so stay tuned and we will find out what the answer really is for that one. We do one of these study groups every month. Thanks for joining us for this one. Of course, when we are not here performing live on the YouTube, you can, of course, look at our entire library of training courses, videos, and other content on our YouTube channel. It's at professormesser.com/YouTube. And if you're there, we would love it if you hit the button to subscribe to our channel. You're also welcome to hit the bell so that you're notified when we start one of these live streams. And you'll know instantly where you could join us for any of these live streams whenever we happen to do them. Don't forget about our daily pop quiz questions for A+. You can find copies of those on the service formerly known as Twitter. Go to professormesser.com/Twitter. You can also go to professormesser.com/Instagram if you'd like the same question, but with pretty pictures around it. And who wouldn't want that? There's also other places you can visit us. If you want to find us on social media, you just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you'd like to find us on. So LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it happens to be. You can find us. If we are there, you will find us there. So that's one easy way to find us. Today, we're going to be talking all about the content and objectives from the 220-1102 A+ exam. This is an exam sometimes referred to as the Core 2 exam because obviously you have to pass 2 exams to earn your A+ certification. This exam, the 220-1102, was released on April the 20th of 2022, and this is an exam that probably will be around until November 2025 timeframe. What is important there, the takeaway, is that as we sit here today in March of 2024, you have plenty of time to study for this exam. So you are studying the right exam. right now to be able to pass your A+ certification. The 220-1102 is a 90-minute exam, and you have to score a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. So this is the interesting part, is this scale that they use. The important part is you need to get a 700. And because it's not possible to reverse engineer how they grade the entire exam, CompTIA doesn't share that information, don't worry so much about how they grade it. Instead, focus on getting that 700. And that's what you're looking for when you hit the button at the end of the exam that says, "I'm finished, please grade my test." You're hoping that the number that comes up is a 700. And if you do well on the exam, it will be a number greater than 700. If you'd like to know more about what you can find on the exam, make sure you get a copy of the objectives. You can find a link over to the CompTIA website at professormesser.com/objectives. The topics that we will cover today are, as I mentioned before, from the 220-1102 exam. They consist of operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So we'll get a mix of different questions in all of those 4 domains. There's obviously hundreds of topics that you will need to know when you're ready to take your CompTIA Core 2 exam. Also let you know that we will have a video replay of this available immediately afterwards on YouTube. I also post an audio podcast version of this live stream so that if you're in your car, you're working out, you don't need that video, you can always find the audio stream. It can be located at professormesser.com/podcast. And if you listen in on a streaming service like Spotify, you can simply search for Professor Messer and you'll find our podcast there as well. In about a day or so, my marketing manager, Lori, will go through this video. Hi, Lori. She's watching the replay, and she is putting timestamps into the YouTube video description so that you can find information even faster. That's another thing that might speed up your studies. You can go back to any of our previous study groups, and you can find exactly what timestamp you would like to click on. Lori does an amazing job with these, and now you can go back years to be able to find anything that you might be looking for in any of our live streams. A nice indexing feature. Turns out that AI type thing doesn't work so well. You have to have an actual human to do some of these things. Very good example of this is that very nice set of timestamps. So make sure you take advantage of those. Also let you know that we're not here all the time online and live, but when we are not live, you can catch us on our Discord server. Simply visit professormesser.com/Discord, and from there, you can join us and chat with others who may also be studying for their CompTIA exams. It's a great study source, hundreds of people there. You can start up your own study group into its own channel at any time, where you can do video and voice and get with other people that are studying and going through the same topics that you are to see maybe how well you're doing with your studies. It's a great resource and a lot of great folks in that community. You can join us at professormesser.com/Discord. And I'll let you know that eventually you will need to take your exam. You can, of course, go to the CompTIA website and pay full price to take your exam. But I'd like to save you a little bit of money because we are a CompTIA Platinum partner. There's not too many of those in the world. We are able to offer you discounted prices for your vouchers if you happen to live in the US or Canada. You can find that link at professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you'll find that those prices on the website are already discounted. You don't need a discount code. You don't need to install any extra extensions into your browser. All you have to do is go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you do that, I'll also give you a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook, where I've compiled all of the best tips and tricks for scoring the highest on these exams based on the exams that I've taken over my career. Learn more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Now let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which was, an administrator has verified malware symptoms on a device and removed the computer from the network. Which of the following would be the next step in the malware removal process? Would this be schedule a scan, educate the end user, disable system restore, boot into safe mode, or update anti-malware signatures? So let's stop this link. And we can see that 51% of you have said the answer is disable system restore. We have 20% that say schedule a scan, 16% that say boot into safe mode, 9% say update anti-malware signatures, and only 2% say educate the end user. Why are we not talking to the end user? Well, at this point, we've already verified the malwares on a system. We have quarantined that system from the network. This is all in the question. So it's really asking us, what's that third step? In this entire process of removing malware, there's this process that starts with identifying the malware, getting that system off the network. Step number 3, what would that happen to be? Well, those of you that are familiar with the process know that step 3 is to disable system restore, because malware can embed itself within the restore points of that system. Some people think they're able to rewind back to a previous restore point to remove the malware. But the reality is the malware authors have already infected the restore points. So what you have to do is turn off the system restore functionality, because it will delete all of the restore points on your system. And in doing that, also deletes any potential malware infection that may have been made to the restore points themselves. So you simply go into here and you tell it that you would like to, well, not optimize the drives. There it is. There's your system protection. And you can disable system protection right there and apply that, or click OK, and you've now disabled it. The screenshot I had up before is not for this. That's for defragging your drive. I guess that's a different question for a different time, isn't it? System restore is what we were looking for. And in fact, 51% of you did choose system restore. It would not be schedule a scan. That comes afterwards. Once we have the system already back up and running, we want to be sure we schedule scans for the future. Booting into safe mode may or may not be necessary, but it's not the next step in the process. And of course, updating the anti-malware signatures is useful, but only after we have removed all of those previous restore points. And as many people have realized, only 2% of you said educate the end user. You would think you'd do that first. What have I told you about clicking those links? Now's not the time. We have to wait until after we finish this entire process. And the last part, at the very end, that last step is finally to sit down with the end user and say, here's why we think this happened, and here's a way we could avoid it in the future, and we can educate our end users. So those of you that chose disable system restore, 51% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, that brings us to our first new question of the month. As many of you know, I always create a new performance-based question in every study group. The performance-based questions that we work with, by the way, are anything but multiple choice. We have multiple choice questions that are available on our website. We have multiple choice questions that we'll do in the rest of the study group. But performance-based questions are what you will find at the beginning of your exam. The first handful of questions you get on your A+ exam will not be multiple choice. So they might be fill in the blank. They might be matching questions. It might be drag and drop questions. They might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. It might be questions where you have to put things in a particular order. It's a lot of different ways to effectively ask you the same information from the exam objectives. And I often tell people, if you know the exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question, you will still know the answer to the question that they ask. So I have for you today, in our very first new question, is a performance-based question, and this question is a matching question. This matching question asks, match the scripting language to the most applicable description. And I made it a little bit easier this month because I have 5 scripting languages that are here. They are abbreviated, so it's a little bit more difficult. And I have 5 different descriptions. So we have a 1-to-1 match between the language and the description. That doesn't always happen on the exam, by the way. Sometimes they'll give you 4 different languages and 7 different descriptions. So you end up having to really go through a lot more. So for those of you listening in on the podcast side, let's go through what these actually are. The 5 different scripting languages are .bat, .js, .ps1, .sh, and .py. Clearly not really giving you more detail than that. And then we have 5 different descriptions. Those descriptions are automatically update certificates on Linux servers. Which scripting language would you use for that? The second is restart all Windows print services each night. Description C is create an interactive browser login page. The fourth is copy a file from one Windows workstation to another. And then the last one is remove temp files on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. So we're looking to match the scripting language to the best, the most applicable description, because obviously a number of these different scripting languages could be used for multiples of these. But I'm looking to know, of all of these scripting languages, which is really the best fit? Which is really the one we should be using? We've all worked places where we've used the wrong thing. Now we want to use the right thing. So what would the right scripting language be for that particular task? Which one fits the best? If you think you know the answer, you can easily match these up. If you think they're already matched, you just need to submit 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E, and you're done. You don't have to type anything else other than that. But this is one where you should just be able to put the letter and the number, or the number and the letter. Submit those, and that way make sure also that you keep track of what you submitted, because this doesn't tell you the answer when you are done. You have to remember what you typed in. So make sure you remember those as well. You might want to make a note of the ones that you chose. So match the scripting language to the most applicable description. We have BAT, JS, PS1, SH, and PY. And those 5 different descriptions are automatically update certificates on Linux servers, restart all Windows print services each night, create an interactive browser login page, copy a file from one Windows workstation to another, and remove temp files on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. See if you would know which one you would use for this. Maybe your manager shows up and says, we need you to take care of an issue for us. We need you to write a script. We need you to automate something for us. And we need to remove temp files on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. Go. Now you have to make a decision. Oh, well, I guess we should start with what scripting language am I using? So it'd be useful to be able to know these. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that is on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link we use for everything that we do. In fact, that will be a link that you can use to submit questions for the second hour. Simply go to professormesser.com/QA and use the link, the tab at the top, to choose the submission process. And in our second hour, which we call our after show, which is really just more of the same show, that after show, I will answer your questions and I'll have a look through what you've submitted during this first hour. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, match the scripting language to the most applicable description. The scripting languages that I have listed, I have abbreviated by using their extensions .bat, .js, .ps1, .sh, and .py. We're going to need to figure out what those are. And then the 5 descriptions are automatically update certificates on Linux servers, restart all Windows print services each night, create an interactive browser login page, copy a file from one Windows workstation to another, and remove temp files on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. So let's start with our first, which is .bat. This would be a batch file. That's the term that we commonly associate with scripts and automation that runs at the command line of a Windows, going back to the DOS days of these, but a Windows device runs batch files at that command prompt. So if you are copying a file from one Windows workstation to another Windows workstation, a batch file will work very easily for that. We could even use the copy command. It's a one-line batch file that copies file from source to the file at destination. And that batch file is one that's commonly, if you want to do a quick script, a quick automation at a Windows command prompt, a batch file will work for you every time. You can even create relatively complex batch files right there at that command prompt. So a nice functionality if you happen to be on a Windows workstation. That's why this description of copying a file from one Windows workstation to another works perfectly, matches very nicely with a batch file. Next on our list, the second one is a .js. That stands for JavaScript. And for those of you familiar with JavaScript, you know that is a scripting language that allows you to automate things within a browser. So when you are in your browser, you're using your Netscape Navigator, and you're going through, maybe you're not using that, maybe you're using something else. But if it's a browser page that's in your Chrome, it's in your Safari, it's in your Edge, it's in any of your modern browsers, you can create an interactive browser login page by using your JavaScript, JS. And in fact, when you go to practically any website out there these days, there are a number of scripts that are running behind the scenes in the page that you're using. It's very common. If you were to look at the source of that page, go to professormesser.com. If you view the source, you will see JavaScript in there. There's a number of different scripts that I run to check and maintain the things that you see on the page itself. Third on our list is a .ps1, not referring to a PlayStation. Settle down, everybody. PS1 is actually referring to a completely different scripting language called PowerShell. PowerShell is one where you are able to take the idea of automation in Windows up to the next level. This is automation for a network and system administrator in Windows. PowerShell is what that's called. Takes the idea of a batch file and includes a lot of features that aren't normally included at the command line. So you're able to manipulate and manage the processes running in Windows, for example. A batch file does not have a way to restart a service as part of a batch file, but PowerShell does. So there are some great Windows utilities and Windows functionality built into PowerShell that you simply don't have in a batch file. And restarting a service in Windows is one of those features. And that's why restarting all Windows print services each night would be perfect to use for something like a PowerShell script. So PS1 fits perfectly with restarting Windows print servers each evening. Next on our list is the .sh. SH literally is a shell script. That term shell originally comes from the Unix side. Linux certainly is a good example of that, where you have these scripts that can run at the command line of Linux, of Unix, of Mac OS, and of other POSIX type systems. So that's what the .sh is commonly associated with. So if you are automatically updating certificates on a Linux server, you'll probably do that from a shell script. A lot of people do this so that it automatically maintains and keeps up with all of the latest certificates, and you can see them listed on a shell script as a way to automate that process. So it runs right at the command prompt of your Linux device. That means we're down to the last one. There can only be one thing left, and it's a .py. This, of course, stands for Python. Python is a popular scripting language that runs across many different operating systems. So unlike things like PowerShell that only runs in Windows, Python can run in Windows, in Linux, in Mac OS, and in other operating systems, which makes it perfect for performing tasks that might be done across different systems and different platforms. So if you're trying to remove temporary files on Mac OS, on Linux, or on Windows, you can do that using Python, and the common abbreviation for a Python script is .py. So those are the 5 different scripting languages we needed to know. It's not all of the scripting languages you need to know for the Core 2, but it is a good chunk of them. You can always go to our video section 4.8 in our 2201102 course. The video name is called Scripting Languages to learn more about any of these. A .bat will copy a file from one Windows workstation to another. .js JavaScript is great for creating an interactive browser login page. PS1 PowerShell restarts all Windows print services each night. A shell script commonly used in Linux, and you can use that to automatically update certificates on Linux servers. And .py Python is great to use across multiple operating systems for removing temporary files on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of things that you could focus on. Certainly it helps you understand and differentiate between these different scripting types, and that is an important thing to know for your Core 2 certification. That is our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you did well on that one. I think now we can shift gears back to a multiple choice-based question. So let's do that with this question that asks, which of the following is used to encrypt and store passwords and notes in Mac OS? Is that File Vault, Spaces, Disk Utility, Keychain, or Finder? Got a number of different options, all of them real things, all of them, I believe, almost all of them from Mac OS. So the question again asks, which of the following is used to encrypt and store passwords and notes in Mac OS? Is that File Vault, Spaces, Disk Utility, Keychain, or Finder? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen and go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link on your screen to submit your answer. A number of you putting your answers in pretty quick on this one. I always check to see how fast the numbers move up on the screen to see how well do I think everyone knows this one. Doesn't mean we really know it, but we all think we know it. So we're locking in the answer. Most of the time we do pretty well. Most of the time we really do know it. So we'll see how well we do with this one. Maybe there's a lot of Mac OS users out there. You're looking at my Mac OS screen right now to be able to see what's going on. So this is very common for me to use. In fact, a lot of people, and I think more and more folks, are using Mac OS in the enterprise these days. So it's useful to know all of these different operating systems if you're planning to get a job doing anything related to IT. This question again asks, which of the following is used to encrypt and store passwords and notes in Mac OS? Is it File Vault, Spaces, Disk Utility, Keychain, or Finder? We're going to stop the poll, and we can see that 69% of us say the answer is Keychain. About a quarter of us, 26%, say File Vault, and then it's down to single digits. Disk Utility got 2%, Finder got 2%, Spaces got 1%. So we're really pretty sure it's Keychain, although there's a good quarter of us that think the answer could be File Vault. This is one where the question itself is very specific, and it says encrypt and store passwords and notes. So this is not your entire file system. It is a part of the file system. It's a part of a file, really. Specific information that we're trying to encrypt and store in Mac OS, store in a secure way. And that's something that's important when we start considering passwords. We don't want passwords to be available to anybody who happens to go into our system. We need something a little bit more secure than that. So if you're using Mac OS, you may already be familiar with Keychain. Keychain is where you would store all of this information. It stores not only passwords and notes, it also stores certificates and other information as well. These are critical pieces of information that you need to keep private, and you want to be sure nobody else can get their hands on it. Keychain is perfect to use for this because it's integrated into Mac OS directly. You don't have to install it. It's nothing that you have to enable. It's just there. And in fact, it automatically uses Keychain unless you tell it specifically you would not like to use that. So this is where we really focus on trying to understand more about where these challenges come from with keeping data secure. And if you need to keep passwords secure in Mac OS, you're going to use Keychain to be able to do that. Keychain is the right answer. Most of us realize that. Almost 70% of us said Keychain is exactly what we would use for this, and you'd be absolutely correct. Now, why would it not be File Vault? Although File Vault does encrypt an entire drive, an entire volume in Mac OS, it is one that encrypts everything in that volume, not just passwords, not just notes, but everything that happens to be on that volume. So in this case, File Vault would be a little bit too broad if all we wanted to do would be to encrypt and store passwords and notes. Obviously, if we really did want to encrypt everything, and in fact, most of the time, that's a common default, especially if you have mobile devices that you take outside of the office, your administrator probably has File Vault, BitLocker, and other full disk encryption technologies already turned on your system. And having an encryption of the passwords and notes on top of that makes it even more secure. And the way that you would do that is by using Keychain. So Keychain is what we were looking for here, which focuses only on those passwords, notes, certificates, and other critical bits of information in the Mac OS operating system. Hopefully that was one. Now we at least know what we can use to differentiate between File Vault or Keychain. In this case, keychain was all that we really needed. Let's do another question. I've got another multiple choice question coming up. Here's this next question that asks, each time a server starts, it receives the same IP address from the DHCP server. Which of the following provides this functionality? Is that address reservation, port forwarding, static WAN IP, UPnP, or MAC filtering? All of these are real technologies, but which one is this one? The question again asks, each time a server starts, it receives the same IP address from the DHCP server. Which of the following provides this functionality? Is it address reservation, port forwarding, static WAN IP, UPnP, or MAC filtering? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen and go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We want to follow the link on our screen and lock in what we think the answer might be. Maybe some of you manage DHCP servers. You might already be using this technology. Or maybe you're someone who has the same IP address always assigned from the DHCP server, and you know what technology they're using or what configuration they're using to make that happen. So this would be a good chance to see if we happen to know it. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, each time a server starts, it receives the same IP address from the DHCP server. Which of the following provides this functionality? Is it address reservation, port forwarding, static WAN IP, UPnP, or MAC filtering? Let's stop the poll and see how you did with this one. Since it's coming from a DHCP server, we had 71% of you that say the answer is an address reservation. But those of you that have worked with WAN IP addresses before and you've gotten a static WAN IP address, you know that the 20% of you selected that as the right answer. 4% said port forwarding, 3% said MAC filtering, and 0% said universal plug and play, which is always abbreviated as UPnP. Well, in this question, we were asking specifically about a DHCP server assigning the same IP address to a device. And since we are talking about DHCP in this question, we're really talking about DHCP reservations. This is where you configure the DHCP server itself to always assign a specific IP address to a specific device. That way there is a one-to-one relationship between those two. No other device on the network would get that particular IP address, and this device is always going to receive and expect to receive the same IP address every single time. It is one that makes it very simple to administer as well. If you need to change that IP address later, you don't have to go to the machine that it happens to be on. You simply go to the DHCP server and make any configuration changes there, which makes it so simple and easy to find and make any type of change, especially when you're talking about changes to an IP addressing scheme. This can be very involved. Sometimes you'll see this functionality described as static DHCP assignment, static assignments, static DHCP. There's different names that different manufacturers will use for it, but it is all the same thing. It is a DHCP reservation that we are putting in there. So this is where you'd have to look at this question very carefully and be able to see what this is. For example, a static WAN IP would be great if we wanted the same IP address on a WAN connection. This would be very commonly a router connection that we would have on the WAN. And as a static WAN IP is not provided by DHCP. A static address is one that is always the same that we are manually configuring into these devices. So whenever you see that, this would be a good example of where an address reservation is a DHCP function that allows us the same IP address every single time. Port forwarding is used to be able to send information from the outside of our network through very commonly a network address translation and then into the inside of our network. If we're running a server or a service on the inside of our network, we would use port forwarding to be able to provide access from the outside, which, by the way, is not a best practice. You probably don't want to do that. The functionality, however, of course, is there. We have Mac filtering. 3.7% of you chose Mac filtering. This is not a Mac as a Macintosh. This is a media access control. That's an abbreviation that is referring to the physical address of a device. We would use Mac filtering if we wanted to stop certain MAC addresses from traversing a device, from going through a switch, from going through a router, from going over a wireless network. We would use that to prevent or allow access, but it has nothing to do with what IP address you happen to be assigned. So Mac filtering would not be the answer we were looking for. And then lastly, UPnP. The universal plug and play is a functionality built into a number of different routers that will have it reconfigure the router to allow inbound access depending on what application you happen to be using. And if it sounds maybe in your mind that might be a little bit insecure, you would be correct. The best practice is not to use universal plug and play. In fact, it's to disable universal plug and play on a system unless you are very, very, very sure of what you are doing and that you understand the risk that that particular feature might bring to your network. In this case, if we have a DHCP server that's automatically assigning the same IP address every time, it is using address reservation, and 71% of you got the address reservation feature absolutely correct. Well done. I have address reservation in my DHCP server. Here's an example of where I have put in specific IP addresses that I would like assigned to two devices. One is named Prometheus. The other is named Odyssey. And on these two devices, they have very specific MAC addresses so that the DHCP server knows which one to give to the correct server. It checks the MAC address. It matches the MAC address to the IP address and assigns that IP address to that device over the network. So that should give you an idea of how you might use something like address reservation. Well, as you can tell already, we're only a couple of questions into this list, and you can see there is a lot of information you have to know on this exam. Things like understanding the network side, the security. We've talked about operating systems and scripting. We've got troubleshooting in this exam. There's a lot of things you have to know. And certainly, I highly encourage you to watch every single one of the videos in my training courses, which are all available to watch for free online. It's 137 videos if you were to go through my entire A+ course. Well, I realize that's a lot of videos to go through. So a lot of people may not be able to go through every single one of them, but still would like the information from those courses. And that's why I've created a set of course notes. These course notes are available in both physical and digital form, and they contain all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the important tables that are listed in my exams. Here's the digital form of these course notes. I'm just going to flip through a few pages so you can start to see the text and the tables, the command line information that we have here, details about the screenshots. It is exactly the same on the physical side as it is the digital side, and you get all of this together. And by the way, if you purchase the physical edition, while you're waiting on that to be shipped, I give you access to the digital edition immediately for free. So that way you can jump in, download it, and while you're waiting on this to arrive in your mail, you can, of course, already be studying across all of your different devices. If you'd like to know more about our course notes or any of our training materials on our site, you can find it at professormesser.com. And for these notes, you can find them at professormesser.com/1102notes, or simply follow the pull-down menus from the top of the Professor Messer website. Let's do some more questions. I've got another one here that asks a question. This one's more of a troubleshooting question. And then it says, each time a user visits a website, they receive the message, "Your connection is not private." Which of the following is the most likely reason for this message? Is it system files have been altered, VPN is disabled, certificate is invalid, user has not authenticated, or operating system is unpatched? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, follow the link on your screen to lock in what you think the best answer would be for this particular question. See if you know what it is. You may have even run into this before and not even realized what the issue might have been. Or maybe you're someone who has a website that you manage and you've run across this problem. Either way, this is one where we really do need to know what's happening in our browser and how can we address this particular issue. See if you happen to know this. Go ahead and lock in your answer. Visit the link professormesser.com/QA to lock in what you think the answer might be. This is one that you do have to know these for the exam. There's a big section in both the Core 1 and the Core 2 that is all about troubleshooting. And this is a very good example of what one of those troubleshooting questions might look like. Let's see if you know the answer to this one. The question asks, each time a user visits a website, they receive the message, "Your connection is not private." Which of the following is the most likely reason for this message? Is it that system files have been altered? The VPN is disabled? The certificate is invalid? The user has not authenticated? Or the operating system is unpatched? Let's see how you did with this one. 77% of us, another large percentage, say the certificate is invalid. 16% though say the VPN is disabled. And then it's down to single digits. 3% say the operating system is unpatched. 2% say the user has not authenticated. And 0%. Nobody says that system files have been altered. Boy, wouldn't that be great if that was the answer? It's not the answer, though. That's not the reason. Indeed, it is related to something in the certificate that is causing this particular issue. You may have seen this before where it says your connection is not private. You can see right there on the screen that is showing us that there's some type of issue associated with the certificate. This even tells us that this server could not prove that it is self-signed. Actually, here it is. It's the badssl.com is where this came from. So if you're someone who would like to see what your browser would look like if it ran into a browser problem, this is a website I use all the time to show images like this, especially because different browsers show things in different ways. So if you'd like to see what your browser looks like when there's a bad certificate, when the certificate time frame is wrong, when something is self-signed instead of being from a known or trusted certificate authority, simply go to badssl.com and you can do that. In fact, just so you know, I'm not telling you wrong, I'm going to go to badssl.com on my screen. So here I am running it live, and you can see if you'd like to see when a certificate is expired, what does it look like? I'm in Chrome right now. And if I click that, it shows me error cert date invalid. That's what that looks like when it's in a out of date certificate. What if it is a certificate that's running maybe has a revoked certificate? What does it look like? Well, it says my connection is not private, and it says that the cert date invalid, and you can even look at more of this and you can get more details about what that certificate happens to be. So they got a lot of things that you can run through in here, a lot of different options. And if you want to know what those are and what they look like and how they are viewed in your browser, that might look different in your browser than it looks in my browser, you can do that. That's at badssl.com to be able to do that. And indeed, that's what we have here is badssl. We need to look at the certificate to see what the problem is. Is it that the certificate is expired? Is it that our time on our clock, our time and date is incorrect on our system? Is it an issue with the domain name or the name on the certificate is different than the device we're going to? Maybe someone has mismatched certificates on their web server. You can find all of that from the browser. So you should be able to do a little bit of research. When you see those messages pop up, have a look at the certificate. You should be able to go into the cert and see what's going on. I do that every single time when I get a certificate error because I want to know, oh, what have they done? Have they let the certificate get expired? Is it a certificate for a different server? What's wrong? And then you'll know a little bit more about how someone's day may be going on the other side based on what's happening with the certificates on their web server. And in fact, that is the right answer. The certificate is invalid in some way. That's really what we're seeing on the browser when that happens. We don't know why it is invalid. We'll have to drill down into it to find out more information about why the cert is not properly showing itself in our browser, but that's your next step, is to be able to do that. We did have 16% of you that say the answer is the VPN is disabled. In this case, we're simply visiting a website. There is no virtual private network. We're not connecting over an encrypted tunnel, or if we are, it's certainly not part of the question that we're dealing with here. So my connection not private is not referring to the communication over the network. It's referring to the browser trusting the server that it's connecting to. So in this case, this issue or this error would not be related to a VPN. In fact, if you send information over a network that is not using any type of encryption or that is not on a VPN, you'll never know it. It's not going to tell you that. So you're really trusting your browser and the server it's talking to be able to keep things private at a browser level, and that's where we're getting that invalid certificate error. 3% of you say the operating system is unpatched. It's unlikely that's what's causing the problem here. It's possible that an unpatched operating system may not have the latest set of certificates so that it's able to properly validate that website, but that's very unusual. You would have to have a very, 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 very out-of-date operating system. Well, we're talking maybe years old for something like that to occur, which means it's probably not very likely. It certainly is not the most likely reason given the others that are available to us in these answers. And 2% say the user has not authenticated. There's no authentication process mentioned in the question. And in this message of your connection is not private is not what you would receive when someone is not authenticated. You would simply see a message that your username and password is incorrect, or you do not have permission to view that. Those would be the type of errors I would expect to see. But when we see something that a certificate problem, like your connection is not private, especially in a browser, you should instantly be thinking about a certificate problem. And in fact, 77% of you were thinking exactly that issue, and you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. I know we've got time for some others. So let's see if we can squeeze in another question or two and see how we do. This next question on our list asks, a company is processing payments using downloadable software from the internet at no cost to the company. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is this PCI DSS, EULA, closed source, GDPR, or FOSS? A company is processing payments using downloadable software from the internet at no cost to the company. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is it PCI DSS, EULA, closed source, GDPR, or FOSS? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen to visit professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Well, you might be doing something like this. I know that there are times and have been times when I process payments using downloadable software from the internet at no cost to me. So what was I doing there? What was that about? Don't do that now, but I do have software I pay for now for something like that. I wonder what that would be. Maybe we should also have a follow-up question on how those things are done. There's lots of ways to process payments on the internet and lots of ways to do this using downloadable software from the internet at no cost. So it's useful to know what you may be getting into if you use software like that. Lock in your answer by visiting professormesser.com/QA and see how well you can parse out what this particular question happens to be. This would be a good one to know. It might help you too and be able to make this happen. Let's see how you did with this question. Again, the question asks, a company is processing payments using downloadable software from the internet at no cost to the company. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is it PCI DSS, EULA, closed source, GDPR, or FOSS? And let's see your answers here. 49, let's say 50% of you say the answer is FOSS. And then we have almost double digits for everything else. 20% say the answer is PCI DSS. 12% say the answer is EULA. Almost 10% say GDPR. And then 8.7% say closed source. So this is one where this happens every day, all the time. where someone is downloading free software from the internet and using it to perform specific functions. In fact, if you go to the Professor Messer website, I am using free and open source software to be able to, as my content management system. I'm using free and open source software as the core operating system on my computers. And that free and open source software we abbreviate as FOSS. This is source code is already out there. You're able to download it for free, as the name implies, on the internet. You can compile it yourself and you can use that software. There were people in the chat room who were even saying, I don't know if I would use free software from the internet to process financial information. But if it's open source, you can see the source code. You can see if this software is doing what you would expect it to do, which is one of the benefits of free and open source software, is that nobody can hide anything in there. This is not pre-compiled software. It is free and open source. And that's what the open source part is referring to, is that the source is available and open for you to view and in some cases modify to be able to customize to your own purposes. And at that point you wanted to compile it, if this is software that needed to be compiled, you could then compile it with the full knowledge of everything that is contained within that software. Closed source, of course, or commercial software would be software where you can't see the source. You are trusting the manufacturer of that software to be able to make something that is not going to be harmful. Now, it sounds like that's a little bit scary, but in reality, we use software like this all the time. If you're running on Windows, Windows is closed source. You don't see the source code of Windows. You simply buy that from Microsoft, and you're trusting when you install it that Microsoft software is going to be something that is legitimate and work as you would expect and doesn't have any type of maliciousness associated with it. We do this with compiled software all the time. So every time you install new software, you should automatically be thinking in the back of your mind, okay, I'm trusting someone else on my system. Oh, here's another company that I'm trusting. Here's someone else that I'm trusting. And you should get in that mode of always thinking about the software that you're installing, where that software is coming from. And if you had to validate that the software was legitimate and did not contain anything malicious, you should have ways to be able to do that. Every time that you don't have that in the back of your mind, then it's an opportunity for software to take advantage of your system. So that is why we would use something like free and open source software. Now, once you are installing the software, whether it is open source, closed source, or anything else, you have an agreement that you must effectively click, yes, I agree, when you're installing it. It's that thing that normally you scroll all the way through without reading, and at the bottom you agree to it. Well, as it turns out, it is contractually obligating you when you click agree. Probably might be a good idea to read through one or two of those. And if you are in a large company where you are buying software for hundreds or even thousands of devices, you may be spending weeks or even months of your time going through the end user license agreement before even purchasing the software. There's a lot of good work that's done between the lawyers at that point to create an open source license or an end user license agreement that is one that everybody can agree with. The end user license agreement, though, doesn't describe the software being free. It doesn't describe it as being open source. It describes the terms that are associated with you using the software. Effectively, you as the end user, what is the agreement for licensing that software? And that's what a EULA happens to be. So in our list of things, our free and open source software that 50% of us chose, that is the right answer. 50% of you were absolutely correct with that particular question. 20% said the answer is PCI DSS. And that's what I put at the very top because I said we were using software that's processing payments. But I was asking about what describes the software, not what type of compliance we must have or we must agree to be able to store credit card numbers. In fact, nothing about this question was even talking about the storage of credit card numbers or any other financial information. So the PCI, the payment card industry, has a set of compliance, a minimum security posture that you must have if you are storing this credit card information or transferring that credit card information across the network. That compliance is the PCI DSS compliance set. And that's why if you are a company that does store that information, you must comply with the PCI DSS. But in this case, we were downloading software and processing these orders. We may not even be using credit card numbers. It might be PayPal that we're using. We might be using cryptocurrency. So PCI DSS may not even apply in this particular case. And because we weren't storing credit cards or mentioning the storage of credit cards, PCI DSS would not be the best description of this particular software. We've already mentioned how EULA was not the right answer for this one. Closed source software obviously would not apply because we are able to use downloadable software at no cost to the company. It could be closed source, but because it is free and downloadable from the internet, it's more likely, or perhaps would be a better description, to refer to this as free and open source software, which makes a lot of sense. GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is a regulation in the EU, the European Union, to protect or attempt to protect people's personal data. This has sometimes been referenced or called the regulation that allows people to ask for them to be deleted from the internet. It is the ability to have someone unknow you on the internet, which probably is not the best or most accurate way to describe this regulation, but it does give users the ability to tell a company, delete all of my data from your systems, and that company must do that according to the GDPR if they happen to be in the EU. This obviously would not apply to someone outside of the EU as badly as the EU tells us that it would apply to us. That actually, as turns out, doesn't work that way. So we normally, if someone was to send from the EU, send me a message and say, please delete my account, I'll delete it because that's fine. That's not a problem. I'm not part of the EU, and I don't have to comply with GDPR, but it's just a nice thing to do. So I think it's not a bad idea to give people control of their own data. And if I'm able to do that based on the rules and regulations that I have to comply with in the United States, then I certainly do that. There are times we are not able to do that. However, the U.S. has our own financial laws and our own tax laws and things that I must maintain. So there's certain types of data that I'm not able to delete because of the requirements that we have in the U.S. So sometimes the international laws or laws in a different country and the laws in this country may not be exactly compatible, but sometimes we try to make them work together. That might work for you. So it would not be the GDPR because we weren't talking about the storage and collection of private data. Instead, we were processing data with free and open source code, and that certainly fits the description of FOSS, and 49% of you got that one absolutely correct in that case. Let's see what other questions we might have on this list. Let's do one now. We talked about Mac OS earlier. We've done some Windows questions. I think it's time for a Linux question. And this Linux question asks, which of the following would allow a Linux administrator to view the CPU utilization on a database server? Would we use netstat, grep, cat, df, or top? A lot of good questions here. I think more than one could be right here, but there's really only one best question here. As you go through and answer this one by following the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, make sure you do that. Let's see if you happen to know what this one is. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. The question again asks, which of the following would allow a Linux administrator to view the CPU utilization of a database server? Is that netstat, grep, cat, df, or top? See if you know the answer. Lock it in as you're going through at professormesser.com/QA and see if you know what this one is. A lot of people getting their answers in quick on this one. I wonder if we're going to get 100% on this one. Let's see how well we know our Linux commands. All of those are real Linux commands, by the way. Didn't make any of them up. They're real stuff. So if you're looking at this going, a cat? Seriously? Yep, seriously. There's a cat. Is there a dog command for Linux? There's got to be, right? If there's a cat command, certainly there's a dog command. And that's one of those things. If you're ever wondering, do you think there is a, yes, for Linux? Yes, there is. Do you think in Linux there could be there certainly is. There's always. So that's a good example of where you're always going to find something in Linux to maybe halfway get you to where you need to be. For some reason, Linux never gets you 100% of the way. It always gets you 90%. It's that last 10%. Always gets you. Let's see how well you do on this one. The question again asks, which of the following would allow a Linux administrator to view the CPU utilization on a database server? Would that be netstat, grep, cat, df, or top? Let's stop our poll and see what you chose. 48% of you say the answer is top. 24% of you say the answer is netstat. 12% say it's df. 11% say it is grep. And then 3% say the answer is cat. Why is the cat down there at the end? Let's go through these questions first and see what your answers were. 48% of you chose top, and that's because that's the right answer. The top shows you the top statistics for the resources on the system. So if you want to view CPU utilization, if you want to see how much memory is being used, you want to see this broken out by the processes running on the Linux machine, you would use the command top. This is one of many commands you could use to do this, but top is a very common one to use. And it does show you a great deal of information. And you can sort things. You can view it in different ways. You can view different processes. There's a lot that you can do from this top utility. It updates the screen in real time. You might think of this as the task manager for those of you from the Windows world. This is the task manager for Linux, if you want to look at it that way. We also have a lot of other details that you can gather from inside of the top command. For example, one I like to see when I first start up top, I look at the load average that is on here that shows me 3 numbers so that I can see instantly how overloaded is this system. And it shows it to me in 1, 5, and 15-minute intervals. So I can see that even though the last minute was relatively busy, it's all relative, 0.1% is probably not a huge load, or 0.1, it's not a percentage, but 0.1 as your load, not too bad, but you can see over the last 15 minutes, it's been 0.01. So gives you instantly what's going on with these. Top is a perfect command to use for that. We had about a quarter of you, 24% of you say the answer is netstat. And although netstat is a great utility for viewing information, it doesn't show you CPU utilization, memory, or any of those other system statistics. Netstat, as the name implies, shows you statistics about the network. So it shows you people connecting across the network or from your device to other devices on the network so that you can see how much information has gone between these 2 IP addresses, what type of information has been sent between those 2, what port numbers are in use between those 2 devices. Netstat shows you network statistics, whereas top shows you resource information or resource statistics on your local machine. So very useful to have. grep is a search utility where you can look for a particular bit of text within a much larger file. If you're looking to find something very, very quickly, that needle in a haystack, grep is a great utility for being able to find text very, very quickly, especially when you consider some of these documents in Linux might be gigabytes or terabytes in size. You can use grep to very quickly search through those and find exactly what you're looking for. But grep would not be able to tell you very easily the CPU utilization on a database server. Instead, we need something a little more real time. It's able to provide that, and top would be the right answer for that. 12% of you say the answer is df. df is disk-free, shows you how much available drive space you have on the volumes that are connected to your Linux device. This is how we would be able to tell if we're running out of disk space. We would run df, and df would give us those statistics. df shows us disk information. It does not show us CPU information. So that's why. And then lastly, cat. Only 3% of you chose the kitty cat. The cat command stands for concatenate. So we're able to take files or other information in Linux, and Linux everything is a file, and you can put one after the other or put them together, concatenate them, and make them much bigger. You can take multiple files, for example, and put them together into one large file by using the cat command. You can do the same thing to the screen by concatenating information. That's what we would use. Concatenate or the cat command does not show us CPU information. the best answer for this one, the one that I would choose, the one that is the right answer, is indeed the top command. That is the Linux command you would want to use for this one to be able to know a little bit better what the different options might be, what the different resources are on that particular Linux machine. Well, as you can tell, there is a lot of information to know in these exams. One of the things I always find problematic is once I go through my studies, I've read the book, I've done some labs, I've gone through the video courses. One of the challenges, though, is I want to test myself. And if you've gone around the internet, looked at some of the practice exams that are out there, unfortunately, the quality of many of them is very questionable. This is something I found very early on, and I realized what we need is some exams that really test us and at the same time provide us with feedback that can help us learn so that we're ready and prepared when we're going to go take this exam. So I wrote my own questions that are written with the same style, the same tone, a very similar structure to what you would find on the exam, but they are all original questions that we have written here. So this is my Core 2 Practice Exams book. This is a book that's available, again, not only in a digital form, but a physical form. These are big books, and they have tons of questions in them. 3 complete exams are inside of this book, including performance-based questions and 90 questions in each one of those 3 exams. I have my practice exams book right in front of me. Let's do a question from the practice exams book. And again, no answers in the chat room. We're going to go through a question I have. This is question A38. It's on page 14 of my practice exams book. It's from the first set of exam questions. This question asks, a server administrator is replacing the memory in a database server. Which of the following steps should be followed first? Should we remove the existing memory modules, wear an air filter mask, disconnect all power sources, or connect an ESD strap? So we have a few different options here. All of these, of course, are things that we certainly should know as we're sitting down. We'll probably need to do all of them at some point. Depending on where we're doing this, certainly 3 out of the 4, but which one would we do first? And that's the real question that we have here. Now, if we think we know the answer and we just want to know, is it A, B, C, or D, even though this is a PDF file, there are still interactive features built into the document itself. And you could, of course, scroll forward. I'm on page 14. You could scroll forward to page 33, but this is a hot link. If I click that, it would take me to page 33, and it would simply tell me whether the answer is A, B, C, or D. But I also have the details, and the details is on page 74. Again, I can just click, and it takes me to page 74. You can see down here at the bottom, it tells you, yep, we are at page 74. There it is at the bottom. So it tells me, here's the question again, and it tells me the answer is C, disconnect all power sources, and it tells me why. Now, this is where the important part comes in for this book, because a lot of the times you'll get the question right, but a lot of the times you get the question wrong. And if you look at other sources on the internet, it doesn't give you any feedback of where to go if you get the question wrong. Why did I get the question wrong? Why is the question or the answer that I chose not the right answer? Well, in my practice exams book, every single incorrect answer is documented. So you'll not only know why the right answer is right, you'll know why every wrong answer is wrong. And that is something that can help you with your study process. If you want to make a mistake with an exam, now's the time to do it. And in fact, every time you make an answer wrong is a learning opportunity, but it's only an opportunity. You have to have something that can actually help you learn. And I think that's what we've done with this book, is give you information that really can fill in all of those blanks for you. I'll also tell you, if you have this book already and you're getting a lot of the answers right, I highly recommend you read through the wrong answers just so you get a better understanding of why they were wrong. Some of the topics that come up as wrong answers might be the right answers on your exam. So make sure that you're familiar with all of the technologies that are mentioned for every single answer that's in here. And if you read through the question and you think, I have no idea what you're talking about with this question, I have a link to the video that is where we originated the question from, so that if you need to go back to that video and learn more about the topic, you have a way to do it so that you really do understand what we're talking about in this particular question. And then once we're done, since this is a PDF, just like your browser, it has a back button. So I'm going to use my back button, which is right here at the top of my screen. And I'm going to click the back button and it takes me right back to where I started. So I was on question number A38. I can go to the next page and go to question A39 next. All of this is from my practice exams book. They are available on my website. If you purchase them with other practice exams books or in conjunction with my course notes, there's even a little bit of a price discount too. So you might want to look into that. All of this is available on professormesser.com/core2pe. It's a great place to find more study materials to help you get through what you need to know for your exam. Speaking of what you need to know for your exam, did you know there is a complete list that gives you a detailed overview of everything you need to learn? And it's free. It's on the CompTIA website. It's their official exam objectives. I have a link over to that site. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives, and there'll be a link there that will take you to the CompTIA website. Or you can just go to your favorite search engine and type in CompTIA exam objectives, and you'll find it's the first link. No matter what search engine you use, that's what it will find. And you can download the objectives from there. They will tell you everything. They're a great checklist. So if you're starting your studies, this can tell you how to start them. If you're someone who's trying to figure out how do I get through all of this data, you can take pieces of the objectives and learn it just a chunk at a time. Take 3 bullets at a time. Take 5 bullets at a time, and just bite off a little bit every day. Bite off a little bit more and a little bit more. And you can always go back to the videos. They match up with the numbers that are in the exam objectives. Can't be any better than that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of things that might help you for your exam. Of course, we do these live streams every month. They might help you as well. The live streams for A+, we've already done for March. This was our second and final one for A+, but we do a Network Plus study group next week. We do a Security Plus study group the week after that, or come back in April. We've already scheduled our next A+ study groups for April the 9th and April the 11th. These dates are subject to change, so make sure you check in with the calendar that's on our website. Sometimes the chaos that is my life somehow affects our schedule. So if you're ever watching this video, it might be a year from now when you're watching this video and you're wondering, when is the next live event? Simply go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll know exactly when the next live event happens to be. Well, that gets us through an hour of Q&A already. Can you believe it? That went by fast. But we're not done with Q&A. Now we have our after show, where I'm going to take questions from you and see what answers I might have around technology, career, or anything else that you'd be interested in asking me. You can submit those questions, of course, from our website. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Also want to remind you, we've got our course notes and practice exams on our website. Follow the links at the top of the page or go to professormesser.com/1102success. Our discounted vouchers are on our website, and they're already discounted. There's nothing more you would need. If you live in the US or Canada, you can purchase those at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, you can find us on social media wherever it happens to be. Go to professormesser.com/Discord/LinkedIn/Facebook/whatever it is, and you can find us on those sources online. Well, thank you for joining us in this first hour. Stick around for the after show. We got a lot more to come, and we want to thank you for being here. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Let's take a sip. Let's bring in a better view. There we go. That's what we wanted. Now it's time for the after show. Now it's time where it's a little more casual. It's certainly less structured because I do no planning for the after show. We are all flying by the seat of our pants. But one of the nice things about that is that when we do these after shows, that everything that we go through are submitted by you. So I guess that's a good idea of how, in this particular case, it does help a bit to be able to go through the questions that you're submitting, and you're kind of doing the heavy lifting for me. So I'm cheating a little bit. I admit that. But you are able to go through this list and submit information. It's all available at professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab at the top of the page. You can switch over to the QA tab and you can submit a question at any time. I'm going to go through these questions on my side, bring them up on the screen. So you may not see them on your screen immediately, but I'll do some filtering on this side. Yeah, I'm watching you. I know the things you submit here. So I go through them and make sure we're getting some high quality questions from this. That's an important part of this. So let's do some more of these. I'm going to step through the questions that you are putting on here. But let's talk about some of these. Let's start with kind of an industry question. This one's from Johnny, who asks, hello, I see very often job postings for IT consultant. It's quite a title. IT consultant. What do they actually do? Oh, this is, I have so many things we can talk about. Is it the same as IT support? Is it something else? Well, this is one of the challenges that you will run into as you start looking at job postings for anything information technology related, is that different companies will use different terms for exactly the same thing. Or they will use the same terms for two very completely different jobs in different companies. This happens all the time. Part of my, the main part of my career has been to work as a technical representative for a technology company. So this, you'll probably have seen this if you worked in any organization where you have people come in and show products or talk about what they sell. Is there's usually a salesperson. They have many names, but we'll use salesperson for now. And usually with that salesperson is an engineer, is a technician, is somebody who knows the technology, so that the salesperson can talk about the business side of things, and the technologist or the systems engineer, sometimes they're referred to as a sales engineer, is the person who really has to know the product. So if you need a firewall, you bring in a firewall company, here's a firewall salesperson and a firewall SE. That systems engineer is the person who has to understand what your problems are so that they can recommend, here's how I would set up the firewall to solve those particular problems. This is something that's a common role within many large organizations that deal with selling their own products, is you need somebody smart to be able to do that. I was smart enough. I was relatively smart to get in and be that systems engineer for a number of different companies throughout my career, including Network General, Network Associates, Palo Alto Networks, and some others. So this is also a lot of fun because you get to travel around. But that job had a lot of different names. In fact, through the years, as I worked in both the same company and in different companies, I had different titles, even though I was doing the same thing. So I was a systems engineer. I was a senior systems engineer. I was a sales engineer. I was a pre-sales engineer. I was a pre-sales and post-sales engineer. So that one job, that's 5 things. That's 5 different titles for exactly the same role. This happens. It's very common in the industry, not just really in IT. It's sort of common in general because different companies have different names for different things. In this case, Johnny was asking about a IT consultant. That's a very broad name for a title, an IT consultant. I worked, one of the very first jobs I had in the industry was working at an insurance company. And I want to say that my title at that insurance company was consultant. I want to say that it was, and I was an internal company employee. And I think I was called a technology consultant or some type of IS consultant, information systems consultant. I think consultant was in my name. If I think back during those days, it was a long time ago. But I do recall that being part of my title. But I was an employee of the company. I was part of their IT department. I was a technician. I was somebody who they would call with problems. I can't connect to this device. The network isn't working properly. My Windows is not starting. I was called to go fix that problem. I was the guy who fixed the stuff what was broke. So consultant seemed like an odd term, but that's what the company, that's what they called it. So through the years, that's sort of what that job turned into. And as we know, the title of these jobs is not often determined by the people that do the jobs. It's usually determined by the HR department or the folks that are in charge of technology or whatever it happens to be. So that's not to say, however, there are some jobs out there that are consulting jobs. For example, if you look at some very large technology companies out there, they have people that will fly in and talk to you about your business and your technologies, and they'll put together a plan, project plan for increasing efficiency, for automating, for rolling out new processes, and they are consultants. They are people that are very well read on those particular skills, and they come up with plans and processes for improving the efficiency of those organizations. Those are traditional consultants, and they could even be IT consultants. So if you ever see job postings like that use those terms, consultant or something very similar, it could be just a technologist, just somebody who goes out and fixes stuff that's broken. Or it could be someone at a very high level that is an expert in business and handles process management or has a particular expertise in a particular area or skill set. And they might be a very specialized consultant who is brought in to be able to do something at a higher level. So it just depends. So I would recommend you have a look at that. Through the years, this comes up every few years. For example, I worked in my career as a systems engineer. I did not drive a train. I did not create electrical diagrams for a building. So people that are train engineers, people that are electrical engineers, people that are civil engineers, are people that have probably had a lot more training and expertise in those particular areas. I could not design a bridge. I could not design an electrical system of a building, and I could not drive a train. And in fact, you'll see that there occasionally will be those groups because there are train engineer unions. There are electrical engineering unions. There are different folks in those areas that don't want systems engineers to be called systems engineers because they don't drive a train and they don't design bridges. So they shouldn't call themselves engineers. So this happens every few years. And we say, okay, well, what do you want to call us? It doesn't matter to us. We don't care. Just call us whatever you'd like. As long as we're getting paid every couple of weeks, we're kind of fine with whatever you want to call us. It turns out nothing ever really comes of that. They never goes any farther than they shouldn't be called engineers. Instead, it just sort of dies down and we end up still calling them engineers. So very often, if I ever run into a problem, say, I need my SE. Who's my local SE? Get the local SE on the phone. So I just assume there's a local systems engineer that I can work through there. So hopefully that's given you some perspective on the names and the terms. Don't get really wrapped around those particular titles. Just ask a few extra questions. Look at maybe a job description, and it should be able to be relatively obvious what that person does, what they work on, and their level of expertise on a particular skill set. Let's keep going through this list and what we have. Here's one that's really more about the exam itself and how we manage the renewals of this exam. This is from Caesar, who asks, if you've already passed an A+ exam, when it expires, is it recommended to renew it? Well, this is a good question because, and in fact, the way you put this question together, Caesar, is an important one because you ask in the question, if you've already passed your A+ exam, first, that would be great. Congratulations if you've already passed your A+. You've earned your A+. The day you passed your exam, the clock started ticking because your certification is good for 3 years. So once you pass both of those A+ exams, you are then A+ certified, and that A+ certification is good for 3 years. Now, anytime during that 3-year period, you can renew your certification. And the instant you renew it, it's good for another 3 years. Not another 3 years from when you recertified, another 3 years from when it was going to expire. So let's take this scenario, because this has happened as well. Let's say you go out today and you pass both of your A+ exams today. Probably don't want to do it that way, but we're just saying. Let's say today you have passed the second exam and you're A+ certified. Your clock starts ticking. You have 3 years of validity on this certification. Let's say tomorrow you go through CompTIA's CertMaster CE program, which technically you can't do because their CE program doesn't work with the current version, but just go with me. Let's say you renew somehow. You have collected CEUs, you've taken the program to be able to extend it another 3 years using CertMaster CE. You've done something to renew your cert in that way. It adds on another 3 years to your certification. So you're effectively now certified for 6 years. Now, it doesn't work exactly the same way if you use a CompTIA exam to renew. It renews everything that you're doing based on the day of your renewal. But that's a little bit different. But there are ways to extend that when you've done this. What you don't want to do is the way Caesar has mentioned it here. You've passed your A+ exam. When it expires, is it recommended to renew it? Nope, it's too late. Once it expires, 3 years from now, it suddenly expires. It's too late to renew it. Once it has expired, it no longer exists. The only way to be A+ certified again is to take both exams again. Probably not what you were trying to do. So that's an important consideration. Some people think just wait until it expires, then I'll renew it. No, 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 too late. You want to renew it before it expires. Just like your driver's license, just like any other document that you have, once it expires, it's gone. You're done. And although there have been times in the past where CompTIA has been a little bit flexible with their time frames, and you could call them and say, oh, my certification expired today. What can I do? In the past, there have been times where they've said, well, we'll give you another week. And it's up to you at that point to renew after that week. What I found lately, there's no more time. They don't do this anymore. They don't give you any more time. Once it has expired, you're done. So don't get into a situation where your certification has expired and you haven't gone through the process of renewing, which these days is relatively easy with CertMaster CE. There have been people that have come to my website and they've said, my certification expires tomorrow. What can I do? And that's one of those cases. What you can do is CertMaster CE. It's really, at that point, one of the few things that is even an option is CertMaster CE. That is something where you can renew your certification in just a few hours. How does that work? I've got a video in the YouTube video description of this video. Just scroll down there and have a look at the description. There's a link there to how to renew your certification in just a few hours. And I talk not only about CertMaster CE, but all of the renewal methods, just so you can see what the advantages and disadvantages are of those. How does the renewal exam compare to the initial exams? They're asking. There are no renewal exams. There's no such thing as a renewal exam in CompTIA's world. There is CertMaster CE, which I guess sort of counts as a renewal exam. It's more of a renewal CBT. That is really what you would do, but CompTIA does not have separate exams just for renewal. So that's one of those that we have to kind of think about as we are planning our process for renewing these exams. Since we're talking exams and taking exams and doing that, the question is, how far apart should I take the 1102 exam after completing the 1101 exam? I don't know. How much time do you need? It's really the question. You should take as much time as you need to be able to learn everything that's necessary to pass the 1102 exam. Now, you don't even have to take them in that order. You could take the 1102 first and then take the 1101 if you wanted to. Certainly something you can consider. But there is no time frame between. There's no minimum or maximum time frame. The only factor that you must consider when you're deciding when to take these exams is you must take both exams from the same exam series before the entire series is retired. CompTIA tends to retire these exams every 3.5 years or so. So as I mentioned on the very early on in the study group, that the current A+ exams are projected to still be around until the end of 2025. Well, that gives us a lot of time to be able to do this. But at the end of 2025, the current 1101, 1102 exams will be retired. And if you had only passed one of them and they retire the series, you now have to start back over with the new series. Don't want to have that happen either. So make sure you go through the process of knowing when the exams are going to retire, how much time you have to complete both exams, and then just take them in whatever time you need to be able to pass those exams. It technically would be possible the day the exams are released, you take one and pass one of the exams, you could wait 3.5 years and pass the other exam just before the exam series is retired. And if you pass that second exam 3.5 years later from the same series, you're A+ certified for 3 years. Now, I don't recommend waiting 3.5 years between taking exams, but you could. It is possible. Just so you know, there's some people that have a belief, or there's some type of thing written somewhere, I guess, on the internet that says you have to take them within a year. Not true. You just have to take them while the same exam series is available. That's your only limitation. It's just making sure they are available and having them there. Other questions. Let's keep going. What other questions we have specific to these? Here is one, since we're talking about renewing exams. This one talks about CEUs. And I really didn't talk about a CEU in that first hour. Might be a good idea to do that if you're someone who would like to earn a continuing education unit credit for watching this 1 hour webinar category. I'd be glad to give you a CEU for this webinar category. The way that you would do that is follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put March 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month. I want to use one from a question that we had. Use the invalid certificate. Invalid certificate is the super secret code words of the month. Submit that to me, and in about a week or so, I'll turn around and get you a continuing education unit email that proves that you must have been here because you followed the instructions, you knew the super secret code words, and I'm going to send you an email that has been digitally signed, which says that you are entitled to 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. So the question, since now we can circle back, Keenan asks, I got my A+ certification in December. I have received 2 CEU confirmations from you, now maybe 3, and have submitted them to CompTIA for credit. But I'm curious as to if there's a limit to how many times CompTIA accepts a certain type of CEU. And in fact, you would be correct, Keenan. There is an absolute consideration there. If you go to the CompTIA website, there's a link at the top for continuing education and a link for continuing education units. For A+, you have to collect 20 CEUs in a 3-year period to renew your certification. Network Plus is 30, Security Plus is 50. But you can't take all 20 of those CEUs and send in webinar CEUs. You can't watch 20 of my events and renew your certification. CompTIA doesn't allow you to do that, but they give you ways to earn those CEUs. Some of them, for example, would be to participate in IT industry events. You can create materials. You can participate or teach or mentor. There's also some for completing training. For example, here's one that would apply here. For A+, we need 20 CEUs. If you attend a live webinar, that's what this technically is, there would be a total of 4 CEUs that you could accumulate during a 3-year renewal period. So as much as I wish you could watch 20 of these and you're done, it doesn't work that way. You can only watch 4, which means you have 16 more CEUs to accumulate, and you would have to go to one of these other categories to accumulate those. Now, some of these, you wouldn't have to do any of this. You could just complete a training course. Completing a training course gives us a 20 CEUs. Now we're done. We have all the CEUs we need to renew. That's it. So sometimes if you've already gone through one of these types of events, you may not even realize you have everything you need to renew because it's in the list. So make sure you go through that list of certifications that are on the CompTIA website. That can give you an idea of what options you might have, the limitations for the different certification units that you can choose, and maybe some ideas of things that you might have already done. Put them in there. It's a great way to do that. Let's go through other questions you have. I want to squeeze in a few more answers that you have on here. So let's do this. Let's talk about this question. Since we were talking about exam series, retiring, and that type of thing, Steph's question says, after I pass the A+, I plan on studying for Security Plus. The exam version is expiring in July. Should I wait until after the exam expires to start studying, or will the info be similar enough? So let's break this question apart, and I'm going to change some of the terms in here to better fit the way that CompTIA refers to these. So Steph is currently working on the A+. After you pass your A+, the plan is to move to the Security Plus certification. Now, right now, it's true that there is a version of the Security Plus exam. Its number is the SY0601. That 601 exam is due to retire in July, on July 31st. So it's not expiring in July. The exam series is retiring. It is going away. It is going to move to Florida and not work anymore. So it is retiring in July. Now, one thing that CompTIA does very commonly is when exams are retired, they will introduce a new exam, usually about 6 months before that retirement date. So you may not even realize it, Steph, but in November, the one we just had a few months ago, CompTIA released a new Security Plus exam called the 701 exam. But right now, both of them are active. Right now, you could go to an exam center or take a test online, and you could take the 601 version of the exam, or you could take the 701 version of the exam. So we're in this odd overlap period where both exams are active. Now, you only have to take one. You don't have to take both of them, but you get to choose which one. The benefit here, obviously, is if you've been already studying for a year to take your exam, they're not going to cut you off and give you a different set of exam objectives. Instead, they give you the 6-month time frame where you can quickly or relatively quickly finish up your studies and take the version of the exam that you've been studying for this whole time. But let's say you're coming along now, brand new. Let's say you've just finished your A+ certification and you're ready to start on Security Plus. You wouldn't start with the 601. That exam retires in July. Why would you want to only give yourself a few months? Instead, you would study from the 701 version of the exam. And since that exam version came out in November, it's still going to be around for 3 years. So that's why you want to be very careful and make sure you check the CompTIA website to know what is the active version of the exam. When was this exam version released? When would we can then do the math, when would we expect this exam version to be retired? And it would be 3.5 years after the date that it was introduced. That's why when I start a live study group, I always tell you, here's when it was introduced, and here's when we expect this exam to go away, so that you can make decisions yourself on whether this would be the version of the exam that you would like to follow or not. This is what we really focus on when we're trying to decide what version of an exam, because although the number is only a little bit different, for example, the Security Plus exam went from the 601 to the 701. How different could it possibly be? Well, it turns out it's very different. The exam objectives are, in that particular case, half of the exam objectives were removed. The exam itself is much smaller. There's a smaller set of objectives added to it. There's so much that was updated with this one. So you can't study for one and take the other. They're not interchangeable. So you have to pick the right one, study from the right study materials, and take that version of the exam. It has to be very directed and very specific. So that's why I always tell people, if you're studying for A+, the A+ isn't retiring until the end of 2025. You got plenty of time to study for the current version of the A+ exam. So at least we can breathe a little bit better associated with that. But it's always a consideration, especially if you're jumping over to Security Plus right after this. Let's do some more questions. We got more in this list. There's certainly more things to go through. You guys are bringing in a lot of great questions, by the way. Thank you so much for submitting those. And you can always submit your questions with the link on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your questions during a live stream. So let's say there's a number of different things. This is a question. I get a number of versions of this question in different ways, but let's kind of focus on this one from Ben, who says, I finished my online course. I'm just scared to book the exam for A+. What would you say are the best steps to take from now? Or should I say, how well can I prepare myself for this exam? Thanks. This is probably one of the number one questions we get, which is, how do I know when I'm ready to take this exam? How do I even study for this exam? Where do I even start to be able to break this apart? One of the first things, of course, we tell people is watch the first video of our course. The first video summarizes the A+ certification, where this comes from, what it's good for, and what you could probably expect as far as study is required. And we give you some tips and tricks in that video as well. But ultimately, and I even mention in that video, what you want to do is grab the exam objectives. I mentioned this earlier. So let's go into the objectives so that you understand why I keep saying that over and over and over again incessantly. Will you stop with the objectives already? Well, that's because the objectives are everything you need to know for the exam. It gives you an explanation of what the exam is at the very beginning of the exam objectives, and then it summarizes for you every bullet you need to know for this exam. So let's take, for example, in this exam, there are 4 different domains: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. These are domains 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we look at the first domain, there are subdomains within it. So the first domain goes all the way to subdomain 1.11. So 11 groups of topics. The first one is domain 1.1, identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. And we need to know in this Windows editions, Windows 10, we need to know Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. We need to know feature differences. For example, domain access versus workgroup. What's the difference between those two? Desktop styles and user interface. The availability of remote desktop protocol, RDP, especially across these different editions. We need to understand the random access memory support limitations, what RAM is supported in each of these editions, BitLocker, and is it supported in each of these editions, and gpedit.msc, whatever that is. We also have questions about upgrade paths and what is an in-place upgrade for those versions of Windows. So already in this first section, we've been given everything we need to know about identifying the basic features of Microsoft Windows editions, and that's what we need to stick to. Now, if somebody comes up and says, all right, what do we need to know about Windows 7? What do we need to know about Windows 8? What do we need to know about Windows 11? As far as this section of the exam objectives is concerned, it's only dealing with these Windows 10 editions and these feature differences. Now, much of this obviously can still apply to other Windows versions, but CompTIA gives you very specific information on what they expect from you. And you should follow their directions, because in this set of exam objectives, they very, very, very rarely go outside the scope of these objectives. They stay so close to these objectives that I will tell you that if you know every single one of these bullets, you can explain all of these bullets to someone else, then you should be able to walk into your exam and pass your exam without a problem whatsoever. That's how close they stay to these. So they've effectively given you what you need. They give you everything you need, and they stay very tight to these specific objectives. The only time I've ever seen CompTIA go outside the scope of these objectives was to ask you questions that they use as more of a testing or monitoring function. They will sometimes want to know, let's see what they know about Windows 11. Let's see what they know about something that we haven't specifically put in the exam objectives, and they evaluate that. In many cases, those questions aren't even graded. They don't have a point associated with them. So I tell people, go to the objectives. This is your checklist. And if you need something to give you some type of verification, you need a barometer where you understand that this could be, we could be ready for the exam. Maybe we're not ready for the exam. How would we know if we are ready for this exam? You go through this list. It is a checklist. And if you can just check off every single one of these bullets, you're ready. If you check off maybe 90% of the bullets that are in here, you're fine. You're going to pass this exam no problem when you walk into the exam room. So use these objectives as your primary study source. They will tell you everything you need to know. They will point out the places where you're a little bit weak. They'll point out the places where you know the content very, very well. And you'll be able to make a note of where you might want to study a little bit more. Use those objectives. They should be the number one tool that you use to guide your way through the process. And that way you'll know, what videos should I watch next? What books should I read? What type of topics should I be working on at the command line? Well, the objectives will tell you, because they'll tell you places where you might need a little more help. Use those objectives. They're very, very powerful. And I think a lot of people don't even realize just how much information is really contained within those set of objectives. Let's keep going through the list of different questions that you have. We got a number. I don't want to duplicate any, so some of these I'm archiving out here and being able to bring these through. Here's one that's sort of a question about the question that we had earlier. I always like questions about questions. So if you recall, we did a performance-based question at the beginning of the study group where we talked about different scripting languages. And two that were very similar to each other was a batch file and PowerShell. And so the question from Edward asks, do you have any suggestions on how to help differentiate tasks with a PowerShell script might be used versus a batch file or a batch script? A batch file is how we generally refer to it. A PowerShell script and a batch file. When would we use these? Because they're both for Windows. They both can run at the command line. They're both can even do similar things because they are both in the Windows operating system. But if you had to differentiate these, there is a limitation. Batch files have been around since the beginning of the disk operating system, or DOS. DOS was one of the very first popular operating systems for Intel-based microcomputers. So we always look to Microsoft, because Bill Gates and Microsoft made all of their money, or at least the initial part of their money, from that very first, very popular operating system for these IBM computers called Microsoft Disk Operating System, or MS-DOS. And even IBM took that, put their own label on it, and had their IBM Disk Operating System, which was effectively a licensed version of Microsoft DOS. And you often will see people referring to a DOS batch file, or we run that in DOS. Sometimes hear people refer to that. Some of them old timers, we're going to run it in DOS. That's what they're talking about. They're going to run it at the command line on this Windows machine. That's now just the command line. So instead of it being its own operating system, they took the functionality of DOS and they integrated it into Windows to maintain backwards compatibility through the years. These days, we don't run a lot of batch files in DOS. We don't write them specifically for DOS, but we can still run batch files and run them very well in that command line functionality of our operating systems. When we start looking at extending that, though, or we run up into limitations with the disk operating system with the command line of Windows. For example, at the command line, if you've ever worked at the command line, you can copy a file. You've learned that in your A+ studies. You can delete a file. You can change directories. You can modify the files that are in those directories. It doesn't have to be in the graphical front end of Windows. You can do that at the command prompt. And there's a lot of power to be able to do that. But at the command prompt of Windows, there are limitations. For example, you can rename a file at the command prompt, but let's say you wanted to restart a service. Let's say you wanted to restart the print spooler in Windows. That's difficult to do from the command prompt because the print spooler for Windows wasn't around back in the DOS days. There is no integrated program to do that. We'd have to use some third-party utility to do that, or we'd have to use a third-party function to do that. There's no integrated operating system command at the command prompt in Windows to control that. Same thing, let's say we wanted to add a user to the Active Directory database. It's difficult to do that at the command prompt without using a third-party utility. So what we've done is create a better version of the command prompt, a better version of the DOS prompt, one that integrates all of the behind-the-scenes administrative features that are important for someone managing Windows workstations and Windows servers. And the name of that interface or that utility that gives us that power that extends the functionality of the command prompt is PowerShell. So that's why we even call it PowerShell. It's not just the shell that we have at the command prompt, it's a PowerShell. And so PowerShell gives us built-in functionality to control these administrative features within Windows. So if you're ever looking at a question and it's talking about modifying Active Directory or restarting a service or modifying a user account, those are things that are very easy to do in PowerShell and much more difficult to do at the command prompt within Windows. So that's where I would differentiate between those. And if you're someone who is really working with both, it'll be relatively obvious. But if you've never worked with them before, you should really dive into them a little bit. Run a few scripts at the command prompt. Run some in PowerShell just so you can get a feel for those. I often tell people if you're looking to build up your skill sets and be able to present to a prospective employer what you're able to do, having a knowledge of PowerShell and having a knowledge of Python are two very, very useful skills. And they get the eye and the ear of hiring managers. Oh, you're familiar with Python? What have you done with Python? Oh, you're familiar with PowerShell? What have you done with PowerShell? Because those managers know the more that you're able to automate, the more you're going to be able to do. The more that you're familiar with scripting in PowerShell, the more that you'll be able to script in other scripting languages. The more you know about Python, the more you're probably familiar with other operating systems such as Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. So already when they hear that, they're already making a few assumptions and they're going to drill down on some of those assumptions because they know those are useful skills and those are powerful skills and they are important skills that you will use throughout your IT career. So if you're not already familiar with scripting, especially with PowerShell, especially with Python, in fact, if you look at this course and you're thinking, whoa, that's too much. There's PowerShell, there's shell scripts, there's VBS, there's a huge list. And you're thinking this is too much to know. Well, you're right. So pick one. Pick Python or pick PowerShell. I don't care which one. Pick one of them and grab a book, go online, watch YouTube videos, do whatever the method is you like to be able to study and learn more about using those individual environments. Once you become accomplished, you don't have to be an expert in PowerShell, but let's say we pick PowerShell, we go learn everything we need to learn with PowerShell. We get relatively familiar with running PowerShell scripts, with creating commandlets, with running particular functions. We can go to a PowerShell subreddit and we can understand what people are saying when we read through the messages. We become relatively familiar with how to use it. Now shift gears and go do the same thing with Python and put those on your resume. Those are powerful skills. There's no certification for these. There's no PowerShell cert. There's no Python cert. You just have to tell people, I am familiar with these and here's what I've done with them. Be useful if you maybe have some tasks in your home lab that you've run using these scripts. There's a lot of great scripts out there that have been pre-built that can do things in your Windows or Linux environment. You should use some of those because they can be very, very useful. Make sure you're familiar with those scripts. And I think those are some of, people call them other types of skill sets or soft skills or additional things known. they often go down as an afterthought onto your resume. But in reality, those should be near the top. Very familiar with PowerShell, with Python. And then if you have stories about how you've used those technologies, that's even better, because certainly they're going to ask about them. And if they do, you need to have an answer. You need to have, oh, here's what I do with Python. I have this server, and every night I run an automated backup process that uses a Python script to take everything that's changed through the last 7 days. It compresses it down to a single file, and it transfers that file over to my cloud storage, which then is copied to multiple systems automatically. And that's how I keep my web server backed up. That's it. There's your answer for your interview when somebody asks what you do with Python. Done. You know, you can do similar things with PowerShell. You can do similar things with shell scripts, with any of these other scripting languages. So just become familiar with those. Let's do some more questions. Keep going through this list. The things that we have here, a lot of good questions in here to work with these. Some of you have even asked, oh, can you use that to restart a print spooler? Yes, PowerShell is perfect for restarting print spoolers. Happens all the time. We do that a lot. Other questions that you have. We went through some of those scripting languages. I think that's great. Some folks, let's talk about this. It's more of a career question, which I think these are good ones to talk about. Career question wise. It's from Keenan, who says, I've recently completed the A+ in December. Congratulations. I'm looking to transition to IT in a help desk role, have about 2 years of software development skills. Well, it's a long time. So we talk about, you must know Python, you must know PowerShell, you must know one of those. That would be a good thing to put in your resume. Keenan continues, am I being too optimistic in thinking this is enough to land a job as a help desk tech? Well, just 2 years of help desk development may be a bit optimistic. And here's why. In the world of IT, there are two different areas within IT, or really within technology. There's information technology, IT. That's what we've sort of been talking about today. It's managing systems, maintaining uptime and availability of servers, keeping data safe, making sure the networks are operating, and keeping systems secure. That's IT. Then there is the computer science side of things. That is often what we call the software development side. And these are two completely different areas of technology. Very often in the media, and certainly in people who are not familiar with technology, they tend to lump these together. There was that big push a number of years ago that everyone should learn to code. And these were said by people who have no idea what it takes to learn how to code, or if there is even other jobs out there dealing with technology. Coding is not computing. Computing is not coding. Technology is not coding, but it is an important aspect of it. But the world of IT and the world of software development are two different worlds. There's maybe a little overlap there, but very little, a sliver of an overlap. In the Venn diagram of these things, they barely touch. That's how very little overlap there is that piece of it. Being able to develop software as I'm mentioning it here in the world of software development or the world of computer science, is about building applications. It's about writing programs for mobile devices. It's about creating web-based applications. It's about rolling out an entire platform of apps on a cloud-based service. We're talking about someone building an application. That's different than someone writing a script. And that's in the world of information technology, as we've already seen, being able to automate and write scripts is an important skill set, but that's not application development. It's not writing an app. It's automation. It's orchestration. It's a way to make things happen even faster. That's what we are talking about when we refer to doing any type of coding in the world of IT. I tend to call it scripting because I think it's a more descriptive language. It tends to describe it a lot better then especially to outsiders or to someone who has never been in the world of information technology, to know that we're not writing apps. We're not interested in writing apps, and we don't write apps. We send it over to the app guys, the developers, and they write the apps. Then the developers give us the apps, we put it on the servers, and we make sure the app continues to run. But if there are any problems with that app, we send it back to the developers, because we're not application developers. We don't write the code. We just make sure the code is running. We make sure it's on a system that will always be available. We make sure that the data that is being stored by that application is stored in a way that is protected, that is secure, that is backed up, and that is available. So that is the two different worlds of technology, the computer science side and the information technology side. Now, that being said, we get into this question from Keenan, who says, well, I got 2 years of software development. What's that worth in the world of IT? Well, it could be worth a little bit. As I mentioned, there's a little sliver between them. But because we don't write code in the world of IT, we don't have any need for those skills. So effectively, those two worlds don't seem to interact very well with each other. You may have to effectively start over if you want to do something along those lines. Now, the benefit you're going to have, of course, is that you've already got experience in software development. You're probably going to be really good at scripting. You're going to be really good at automation, and you can build out these Python scripts or these PowerShell scripts probably relatively easy, which does give you a heads up. So there are some advantages here, and you should absolutely take advantage of those. As I mentioned, those are skills everybody wants. What you won't find, though, is somebody looking at software development skills and saying, well, finally, somebody who can write an app for us. No, that's not going to happen. That's not what we do in information technology. So that's where you would certainly think about, how could I use this to be able to do something else? Back in the day, and this is only maybe 5 years or so, there was that big push into DevOps. That is the big term that everybody started using, where the management of the companies thought, we had these two worlds. We had computer science and we had IT. What if we could force them together? What if we could cram them together and somehow do both of those with the same people? We would save so much money if we did that, because we would only need half the number of people. It was really all a numbers game from that perspective. What they found was that the world of application development and the world of information technology were two different worlds that had their own levels. Each world had its own level of complexity. You could spend an entire career trying to become proficient in either one of those. And there is so much to know that there is no way that you could possibly do all of this as a single person. You might find one person in the world, two people in the world do something like this. But as it turns out, those two jobs are completely incompatible with each other. And so it became very difficult to find someone with the skill set that wouldn't ask for twice the money to be able to do all of that. And what people were really looking for was somebody really good at scripting. That's effectively what DevOps turned into, somebody who could script. They call it infrastructure as code. They call it DevOps. It's really somebody who's just writing good scripts and configuration files. That's all it is. So don't worry so much that you have these software development skills and you're wondering, can I use them? There will absolutely be some of that skill set that you'll be able to bring over. Just make sure you position it properly if you're moving into the world of IT, so that you don't run into that situation where someone is dismissing the application development side of your resume because we don't need somebody to write apps for us. Instead, you should be changing your resume to focus on automation, to focus on scripting, to focus on orchestration, especially cloud-based technologies. That will get you a little further along. And even though we don't tend to use that DevOps word as much anymore because it effectively didn't have any definition to it and still doesn't have definition, it is something that people need the skill set, even if they don't know what to call it. DevOps it's one of those where it's the same term as sort of cybersecurity. Like, it's a term we throw out, but as soon as somebody says, well, are you looking for DevOps? Then we have to ask, Okay, what do you mean by DevOps? And then we have to go through the explanation of it. Well, here's what I mean by DevOps, which, by the way, is a different way for DevOps. It's a completely different for someone else to know what DevOps is. So we have to always define it when we're talking about it. And I think that's why we've all just decided, let's just not call it DevOps. Let's just call it what it is, because instead we have to define it every time we mention it to someone and go down that road. But you may still find organizations that say, oh, we have a DevOps team. Well, they have a team that does scripting and automation. So that's what they're talking about most of the time. But it's always a good idea if somebody says, well, we have a DevOps team. What do you mean by that? What do you mean like they're doing everything? They're writing the code, they're deploying it, they're following the best practices for change management, and then they're maintaining it after the fact? No, nobody's doing that. As it turns out, that's what we wanted. Nobody's really doing that, but we're trying. As it turned, I think we took the best of IT there, and we really focused on the automation part of it. And in reality, that's what really the value of DevOps was really the automation part. The more we can do with automation, the better we're doing there. So that's where I'm coming from a DevOps perspective. Maybe that gives you a little perspective there. I think that's one of the benefits, of course, of technology in general, is that we change things as we go. We find new ways to work with these technologies all the time. We find new technologies to integrate along with it, and then we just make it even better. And whether that's automating, whether that's building out the cloud, whether that's making devices more secure, whether that's building our data structures and getting big data and working through it, whether it's some type of automation of that data, we're finding ways to work with it. And that's one of the huge benefits of technology and how we approach the world of IT. And it's one of the things that I always found fascinating about this industry. There's always something new to learn. And if you're wondering what's next, it's always something coming down the road. There's always going to be a new technology emerging. And 5 years from now, we'll all be talking about what the newest set of technologies is that we don't know about today. Find any other line of work where you have that level of interest, of changes, of things to learn, of opportunities. It's all something that's very unique to IT, and one of the things that keeps me so interested in this line of work and getting other people involved in it as well. Well, we've hit the top of the hour. That gives us at least some perspective of questions that you may have wanted to have answered. Thank you so much for submitting them in this after show. We do these live study groups for each one of our courses at least once a month. Come on back next week. We have our Network Plus study group that we're going to go through. The week after that, we have Security Plus. They're all on our calendar. You can find it on our website at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you so much for joining us on this live stream. We've got a lot more to do. We look forward to seeing you next week with Network Plus. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the A Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.